What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Short Shifts podcast. I am your host, Ben Burnett, and joining me as always, my pal and yours, the talented Mr. E, Louis Ezekiel. Louis, my pal, my friend, my buddy, my guy, how are you doing this fine Thursday evening?
Doing all right. Maybe following the box scores a little more closely than is healthy for me, but you know, hanging out there's potential in this playoff race in Cupful Tier 1, the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League Ultimate. That's what I meant. And yeah, I'm just living and dying with every shot here, bud.
Well, that sounds tough. I could not be me, he who has been forcibly removed from the playoff hunt and is now waiting out the relegation bracket. But Louis, we have an exciting show, and we should hop right into it as trade season continues leading up to the NHL's trade deadline next week. We have 3 trades that have happened since our Tuesday night show. First, we have Ben Chiarot going to Florida for a first, a fourth, and a prospect. Calle Jarnkrok to Calgary for 3 picks. And Frank the Tank Vatrano to my New York Rangers for a 4th-round pick. Louis, I know you mentioned Chiarot as a guy whose imminent trade likely would kill his fantasy hockey value. Anything to add about Chiarot now that we know his destination, or that, you know, is worth saying about Jarnkrok and Vatrano, players who are likely not widely rostered in fantasy hockey circles? Although I know Jarnkrok has had a few spells of being fantasy relevant this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said everything about Vatrano that I wanted to say in the Tuesday show. I don't think that this trade is any good for his value. He's probably going to be out there, to try to play some effective defense. And I know the coach was saying his attitude and his energy would be a positive for the team, that he's a warrior out there, all the intangible stuff. But they don't count intangibles in fantasy hockey, so I think we can say goodbye to Chiarot for sure. For Jarnkrok, I think that he is going to provide shutdown value, probably on a third line, maybe with Blake Coleman, I think could be really effective. But again, don't see a ton of value there. I think Toffoli is the guy who was brought in to Calgary to score. So I don't know that Jarnkrok is going to have a whole lot of value outside of being a depth piece. I actually am kind of interested in Vatrano. He was the cheapest buy. And I know that this is, Florida probably shedding some room to try to get into the hunt for another forward, maybe a Giroux or someone else. But I actually like that he got in onto the line with Strome and Panarin. I think that's a nice spot to have. I don't think he has anything. I don't know if he has second power play time or no power play time, but
he does have second. He's on the second unit. Yep.
Yeah, I sort of thought that might be the case. But actually, for even strength, I think that's a nice deployment, and he could be, keep an eye out and see if he maintains his ice time and if he is productive. I had some moves available, so I tossed him in for a defenseman in our keeper league that we're in together to try him out and see if he could come out with energy in his first game in New York. I think he of the 3 certainly is the one who maintains at least some fantasy value. I don't see a lot for Chiarot or Jarnkrok.
I agree. Vatrano on that Panarin line is an interesting spot. I definitely not somebody who, our keeper league, 14-team league, I think that's a reasonable stream, but certainly not somebody who I think needs to be, in most leagues, people don't need to rush out and grab. But yeah, I think somebody who is worth keeping an eye on as long as he maintains his space next to Panarin. And I mean, the Rangers are a team who had holes on the right wing most of the season, ever since alienating one of their recent first-round picks and sending them back to Russia, and trading Pavel Buchnevich for a pile of broken hockey sticks. Here we are, Frank Vatrano, a pretty cheap option to fill in on the middle six. So I'm happy with that for the Rangers, especially compared to some of the other values that we've seen being traded across the NHL. Louis, let's hop over to our first headline of the night, and it's over in Ottawa.
Yeah, a bit of a bummer here. Thomas Chabot out for the year. He fractured his hand in a loss to the Blue Jackets. he hadn't had the kind of season that maybe we sort of hoped from him. Doesn't, help, obviously, that his stars spent time this season either waiting out for their contract or injured, obviously. He was starting to turn it around over the past 10 games, going a point per game over that stretch. If he's done, and that does seem likely, he'll finish on pace for 51 points, largely in step with what he did last year. He also averaged 3 shots a game this season, so we certainly like to see that. Erik Brannstrom took over on Power Play 1 the other night. He didn't put up any points, but this could be an interesting spot for him, and he might be worth taking a look if you need to fill out a defenseman on your roster. Most waiver wires are not overflowing with Power Play 1 opportunities. So that's a guy who could, potentially be an option. We'll probably see Artem Zub get a little more time, although I don't think he is particularly interesting from a fantasy standpoint. But I might take kick the tires on Erik Brannstrom to see if he is going to be able to string together, a point for you every other game, maybe provide some peripherals and some increased minutes in an expanded role.
Yeah, I went out, I grabbed Brannstrom in a couple of our leagues together. Also a guy who I think is, more interesting in deep spots. But if you are desperate for defensemen, and I know that there are some teams that are, Erik Brannstrom seems likely to be a Power Play 1 defenseman on a team that has a pretty solid top power play unit. So yeah, I feel like I'm a little bit higher on Brannstrom than you are just based on that rundown. But yeah, I think you have it right. You're sort of just hoping. I guess I kind of see him as like an Adam Boqvist as a comparable of a guy we've spoken about a few times this year when Werenski has gone down in Columbus, a guy who you're basically counting on or hoping to get in on the score sheet on the power play. And a bit of a speculative ad, but maybe somebody who can turn some heads towards the end of this season. And I think in his case, hopefully earn some trust with the coach in Ottawa and sort of become the player that he was hoped to be when he got traded over in the Mark Stone trade from Vegas.
All right, well, let's head over to Las Vegas. We need to talk about the Vegas Goals In Knights because they are really struggling in goal with Robin Lehner out and injured, and the news gets worse. Jesse Granger reported Thursday that Robin Lehner's latest injury, which we talked about a little bit last week, is looking like it's probably pretty serious. It could be a fractured kneecap. There's no definitive timeline yet, but Jesse said Lehner has the possibility to be out for the year. A lot of folks took flyers on Brossoit or Logan Thompson as potential stopgap solutions since they might get run on a team that's supposedly very good. They got, they returned Jack Eichel, but they've really just been struggling, giving up 12 goals over the last 2 games. Both goalies are sub 900 save percentages on the year. Making it worse is we're getting reports, conflicting reports on who's starting. For instance, on Thursday, we spent most of the day assuming that it would be Brossoit based on some comments from some sources on Twitter, and then it turns out that it's going to be Thompson. That just adds kind of insult to injury as we're juggling these goalies who are really struggling. And of course, they are up against a very tough Panthers team this evening. Just disappointing, since the door-to-more start seems to be open for either of these guys, given that Lehner has been pretty mediocre. He's been a bit of a disappointment this season. The question has to be, maybe against Florida, it goes without saying, but just in general, are Vegas goalies to be avoided for as long as Robin Lehner is going to be out? Are these guys viable fantasy options, or are you just asking for trouble by rostering them?
I mean, at this point, it seems difficult to say anything other than they're to be avoided. How could you trust them right now? You would need to see one of them sort of regain a little bit of trust through some solid starts before being able to get any one of them back into your lineup, I think.
Yeah, even the Cupful, which has a pretty generous goalie scoring system, they have been providing negatives. They've had nasty, not putting up quality starts, putting up really bad starts. Just seems like things are a bit of a mess. This was a team that we, had talked for a long time as being, one of the sure thing, playoff teams out of this division. And now it seems like they might have to kind of fight for their lives to make the postseason.
That is where we're at this point, and it is bizarre. Hopefully Lehner is back sooner than we expected, but I'm probably holding on in most leagues where I'm able to stash him on IR, and otherwise it's in 1 year leagues I think he's pretty close to a drop, eh?
Yeah, it's definitely seems tough. Even if he is not out for the year. He might only be back for a week or something. So yeah, it could definitely be a challenge to hold him. And of course, we should mention, there's always, this is obviously pure speculation, but there's always the question of, will there be that reunion between Marc-Andre Fleury and the Vegas Knights? Could be interesting to see if that takes place.
Well, we'll know soon enough if it is to be. Lewis, we have a goaltending outjury, fortunately, although it is a little bit less exciting than it would be if Robin Lehner was coming back. Jake Allen is back in the crease for Montreal tonight, sporting a .901 save percentage on the season. So, not somebody who we're looking at as the Jake Allen who, when Montreal traded for him, was seen as the greatest backup goalie in the NHL. Everybody was losing their minds over this incredible general management performance by Marc Bergevin. But I guess because of the shot volume Allen was seeing in Montreal early this season, he was fairly solid in points leagues before the injury knocked him out for the last few months. It will be interesting to see what he can do behind this somewhat improved team under Martin St. Louis. Certainly, I would say, I think fairly easy to say, a better option than Montembeault, Primo, or Hammond were while Allen was out.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, we certainly saw a lot of struggles, especially Montembeault recently has been very tough to roster. So yeah, I think I would certainly prefer Jake Allen over either of the Vegas goalies. I think that he, is capable of being a very successful goalie. Now, of course, we do have the threat of, him being the guy, at least for the time being in Montreal, is a little bit worrisome just because he has struggled sometimes with that type of weight placed upon him. But yeah, I don't mind him. I mean, we're looking at a Montreal team that's been playing a lot better under their new head coach, Martin St. Louis. I think that he is a reasonable option. Maybe not to grab and hold or give up anything significant for, but if you're looking for someone to stream in, or if you just are hard up for goalies and need to grab someone, I actually don't mind Jake Allen as much as I sort of thought I would when I first started looking at him as we were talking about this outjury for him.
I'm with you, Lewis. I think that Jake Allen is a pretty reasonable guy in net. I would prefer him to the Knights goalies at this point. And I think, rest of the season, I think he's a pretty decent, option, I guess. If he's still on your waiver wire, was not grabbed in the last few weeks, as it seemed like his return started to become a bit more imminent, I think it's somebody who might be worth grabbing. Lewis, we are going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we have a couple of streaks to get into. You're listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. And Lewis, we are going to hop right on over to Edmonton for our first streak of the evening. And this one is a first liner in Edmonton, at least for the time being. Kailer Yamamoto has been very solid playing on line one and power play one, playing with Evander Kane and Connor McDavid at even strength, and on the top power play with McDavid, Draisaitl, Kane, and Tyson Barrie. 5 points in Yamamoto's last 3 games. He's also seeing a massive uptick in time on ice, up to around 20 minutes a night the past few weeks, well above his average time on ice on the season of 16 minutes per game. I guess the fly in the ointment is the return tonight of Jesse Puljujärvi, who looks to be playing on line 2 with Zach Hyman and Draisaitl, which is great for Yamamoto at even strength, but Puljujärvi was kind of the guy on power play 1 prior to this injury. So I am preaching a little bit more caution than I'd like with Yamamoto. I want to be excited. I want to tell folks, go grab this guy, putting up numbers, playing with Connor McDavid at all situations. But I am instead going to say, keep your eyes on the Oilers power play lines tonight. See what happens with Puljujärvi. If Yamamoto still puts up points at even strength, I think probably you kind of have to grab him before the hype gets too hot. But yeah, I think that this is a really interesting spot for Yamamoto, and it would be great to see him put up. He was somebody who was incredible in the second half of the season. God, I think it was 2 years ago now, playing with Nugent Hopkins and Draisaitl. Maybe he could be a second half performer who, we come to expect this from him. But yeah, into Yamamoto. Not loving this for Zach Hyman, who is now decidedly off that top power play unit, not getting McDavid exposure at even strength, and has certainly cooled off after he sort of had a nice hot streak earlier in February.
Yeah, it seems like we're kind of passing the torch around among some of these forwards in Edmonton, especially while Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is out. Obviously, his return would change things around significantly too, but it's very vague about when that return could be. So, yeah, I think Yamamoto is an interesting grab in the meantime, even if he's not maybe going to hold on to that top power play spot if Puljujarvi comes and takes it back. Although it's worth noting that, that 4-minute increase in time on ice, obviously with the team leaning on that first power play the way that they do, some of those minutes were coming with the man advantage. So you might want to moderate your thinking a little bit. He's not getting a 25% bonus in ice time, probably if he is off that top power play. But yeah, I think, even if he is just with McDavid at even strength, that in and of itself is appealing enough, as long as he is streaking, because we like to see players producing with McDavid. It adds to their opportunity to potentially stay there. If Tyraddy can do it, then Kyler Yamamoto can do it.
All right, Lewis, why don't you take us over to our next streaker?
I can barely bring myself to talk about this one, Ben. As you know, I am a noted Nazem Kadri fanboy, but I owe it to our listeners to be very clear about when things are going well and when things are going poorly. And Nazem Kadri is on the first cold streak of his season, 1 assist in the last 4 games. He has fewer than 2 shots a game over that period. It's also concerning that the top power play minus Kadri and with JT Compher scored during the last game. If Kadri is on this weekend line 2, with Nichushkin up on line 1 replacing Landeskog, and if he's not getting full run on power play 1, it may be reasonable to worry a bit. I don't know what the actionable advice is here, because certainly you're not going to drop this guy. But, we got to hold on, hope that he works his way back to full power play 1 status. And if the Avs can add a wing to replace the depth they're losing from Landeskog, I think that could obviously be a boost to see Kadri get back going in the next direction. It's just tough to see him, not really do anything of significance for your team in a week where Colorado's only going to play 2 games for their managers. So yeah, just unfortunate to see this little cold run from Nazem Kadri here.
Your boy, Lewis. I hate to see it for you. I don't really have much to add, because I think, maybe it's the losing Nichushkin at even strength that sort of, I know that he's a guy who has been a darling of the advanced analytics or the analytical community for the past few years. So maybe it's losing that play driver that sort of made it a bit more of a uphill battle to find offense. But yeah, definitely not exciting to see Kadri struggle at this point in the year.
All right, Ben, why don't you take us to the New Jersey Devils crease? We've got another cold streak to talk about.
Yeah, so unfortunately, it was about a week ago, Nico Daws was the darling of the Devils crease. He looked like he was poised to finally offer a medium-term solution with Blackwood out indefinitely. But in just 2 games this week, Daws has given up 8 goals on just 40 shots, getting hooked halfway through each game by the coach, bringing his save percentage on the season down to a .902, very similar to Jake Allen, who we talked about a little bit earlier. So at this point, Dawes' numbers, if you're looking at the game log, it's a bit hard to read. It's hard to sort of guess what could come next. He's had some hot runs, and now if you were rostering him, it's hard not to feel, I think, like you've touched a hot stove, and it's tough to get yourself excited about putting him back in the crease, given how badly he's burned his managers over the past few games. I kind of wish I had more to say about Dawes, but honestly, I'm just nervous about him. I'll say if you need someone to start, I'd want to look in several different places, including Jake Allen, if possible, before you get stuck starting Dawes. But yeah, that's I don't know. Do you have any takes on this? Is Dawes good? Is Dawes bad? The advanced numbers don't look good. The save percentages aren't looking good. I don't know if there's much more to say at this point.
I don't think he is as good as he was during the hotter part of his, 9 straight games, I think, that he started for the Devils. it's worth noting that he played, after getting the hook in that previous game, I think you mentioned. So kind of going back to back, at least to a certain degree. I think that does damage his confidence, which I think is a little bit concerning. With goalies, we worry about the mind game stuff, I think a little more than most of our forwards. I think you're right. I think I would prefer Allen to Dawes, in part because it seems like Montreal has kind of shaken some of this defensive disastrous play that they were having. They're being a little bit more responsible. They're playing tighter in some of these games, whereas it seems like the Devils are more liable to have the doors blown off at times. And I think the Devils' offense is capable of throwing bigger punches. But, if you're winning games 5-4, that's not great for your goalies. So I think that, I might avoid Dawes and stick to Allen as long as we're ranking the goalies that we've talked about here this evening.
All right, Lewis, we have one more streak to get to tonight. Why don't you take it away?
So on yesterday's Keeping Karlsson patron cast, where Brian and Elon answered every question that the patrons asked on our Discord channel, I couldn't log in until 2 hours in and they were still going strong. But one of the teams they were talking about was the New York Islanders. They have the most games left of any team. And they got a couple players right now who are running quite hot and who are under 50% owned. Anders Lee, in classic Anders Lee fashion, has gone from being ice cold, 1 goal over the course of 8 games, to red hot, 9 goals and an assist in the last 6 games. And obviously still some time going in the game here on Thursday night. And also in classic Anders Lee fashion, we actually made a comparable to him earlier in the week, but he's doing all the scoring and none of the assisting. He's a real Cy Young type. He does not like to distribute very much. He likes to be the finisher. This little streak they've been on of positive offense has also seen Josh Bailey get 3 goals and 4 assists in the 4 games previous to Thursday night. I don't have updates on what he's done here on Thursday. But those are 2 quite interesting players. Yes, they play for a team that is pretty boring offensively most of the time. But we've been seeing some very nice, some nice scoring numbers from them and some nice goaltending too. Varlamov and Sorokin have had some real highlight reel saves the last couple games. It's been really fun to see. I know this is a team that is probably past its ability to maybe climb back into the playoff hunt. It's just too tough out there in the East. But they're playing some good hockey right now. They've got lots of games left. And certainly, a player like Anders Lee, who is just putting the puck in the net with wild abandon, could be the kind of guy who would be nice to add to your fantasy team. And he is available in 57% of Yahoo leagues right now. So think about putting Anders Lee on your roster.
Sounds good to me, my friend, and that is all the time that we have for tonight's episode. For myself, Ben Burnett, thanks everyone for listening, and Lewis, thank you so much for listening, thanks for listening to my crap. Thanks for joining me tonight. Had a great time. Can't wait for next week.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone so much for joining us. Please make sure you are subscribing to the podcast so that you get all the updates every time we have a new episode. You can give us a follow on Twitter at ShortShiftsKK, as well as Brian and Elon at Keeping Karlsson and Dave Benton of the Stream Scheme at NHL Stream Scheme. Also recommend you follow at Game Day Lines, at Game Day Goalies, and at Game Day News. Elon and Shams do such a great job keeping everybody up to date with all the news you need. Check out the great sites where we research our episodes at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. And until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.